The word slammed into me like a physical force. You guys should just stay. Seriously, no more back and forth. This is your home now. Brandon's voice rang with finality as he gestured toward his parents seated at our dining table. My husband's eyes locked with mine, his smirk unmistakable. Right, babe. I felt my fingernails digging half-moons into my palms under the table as Walter nodded approvingly. Cheryl beamed at her son while scooping another heap of her lumpy casserole onto my plate without asking. The casual way they all looked at me, expecting compliance, assuming surrender, made my throat constrict. The kitchen suddenly felt too hot, too small. The garden visible through the window was unrecognizable. My herbs and tomatoes long gone, replaced by Walter's sprawling squash vines. The refrigerator hummed in the background, now stocked with their food, not mine. Even the air smelled different. Cheryl's cloying perfume had settled into the curtains she'd replaced without asking. My name is Ashley. I'm 31 and a real estate specialist. This is the story of how I reclaimed my life by selling the ground from under their feet. I had one ironclad rule before marrying Brandon 3 years ago. One non-negotiable boundary. We would never live with his parents. It wasn't a preference. It was a deal breaker. I'd watched my mother slowly disappear inside her own home, erased by my grandmother's constant criticism while my father stood silently by. When Mom finally fled with 12-year-old me in tow, leaving my brother behind, I made a promise to myself. No one would ever push me out of my own space. I can't live with your parents. Ever. I'd told Brandon plainly during our engagement. Totally, I'm the second son anyway. My brother will take care of them. He'd assured me with that easy smile I'd fallen for. Don't worry. For almost 2 years, that promise held. We moved into the charming suburban house I'd purchased using my inheritance, though I'd told Brandon it was a rental through a connection. The wraparound porch, fenced yard, and garden patch were mine, paid for with money my father had left me. It was our fresh start, just the two of us. Then his parents started visiting. First Sundays, then Thursdays, then random Tuesday afternoons, using the spare key Brandon had given them, just in case. "Oh, this place is just so cozy," Cheryl would say every time, her saccharine smile never reaching her eyes. "You're so lucky to have this much space." "You could grow tomatoes here," Walter added once, eyeing the patch where I'd carefully planted herbs. Brandon laughed. "Why don't you two just move in already?" I turned to stare at him. He raised his hands. Kidding, obviously. But the glint in his eyes told me everything. That wasn't a joke. That was him testing the waters. The invasions accelerated. Cheryl arrived with an entire sea bass one day. It was on sale. I figured you could fillet it. You're such a good cook. I'd never touched a whole fish in my life. After hacking through a YouTube tutorial, Cheryl examined my work. "Well," she sighed. "It's definitely not restaurant quality, but it's edible." Walter uprooted my herb garden without asking, replacing it with massive squash vines. "Don't worry, we're doing you a favor," he said, brushing dirt from his gloves. "This soil's good." Brandon said nothing. Food vanished from our fridge. Whole packs of chicken, my yogurt, my leftovers. When I confronted Cheryl, she pursed her lips. "Well, maybe you should label it then. I'm not a mind reader." Brandon jumped to her defense. "Ashley, don't be petty. It's just food." Something cracked inside me then, a bitter recognition I hadn't tasted in years. That night, I lay awake watching the ceiling fan turn, wondering, was this how it started for my mother? One boundary crossed, then another, then silence, then survival? The next morning, I asked Brandon directly, "Are your parents planning to move in?" He blinked too rapidly. "What number? Why would you even think that?" I just stared. "Even if they did, what's the big deal? It's not like we don't have the space." "You promised me." Brandon rolled his eyes. "Things change, Ashley. Life changes." I didn't like that answer. It wasn't just the words. It was his dismissive tone, like our agreement had never mattered. I needed truth, not more evasion. I called Fiona Brandon's sister-in-law, married to his older brother, Elliot. We'd exchanged numbers at the last family gathering, and though we weren't close, she'd always been kind to me. Fiona was quiet and observant, never confrontational, but I'd always sensed she noticed more than she revealed. "Hey," I said. "This is a little weird, but have Cheryl and Walter said anything about moving?" A long pause. Then Fiona exhaled. "You don't know?" My stomach clenched. "They didn't tell you about the building?" "What building?" "Their condo's being torn down. Foundation issues. Everyone's been notified. Construction starts in 2 months." I nearly dropped the phone. "They've been trying to figure out where to stay. Elliot and I offered to help with a rental, but they refused. Walter said Brandon already agreed to take them in." I didn't speak. "And there's more," Fiona added quietly. "When we found out how expensive relocation would be, Elliot said they could put the condo in his name and we'd pay the repair fees. Brandon lost it, said the deed should stay with their dad, said it's his right as a son." The truth crystallized instantly. "So he's fighting for inheritance by housing them." Fiona hesitated. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but yeah, he made it clear he wants to be the one to care for them so he gets what's left when they pass." "What's left?" I whispered. "There's nothing. The condo's underwater, and Walter's still paying off debt from renovations." My husband had known this all along. The visits weren't casual. The fish, the gardening, the fridge raids, they weren't temporary. They were a slow-motion invasion, planned behind my back. I thanked Fiona and hung up. Then I stood in our kitchen, staring at the garden, at the overgrown vines, at the space they had claimed as theirs. And I smiled, not because I was okay, but because I knew exactly what I was going to do. I stopped fighting, stopped nagging about the fridge, stopped moving Walter's tools from my counter. Instead, I said, "No problem," and quietly began putting my own plan into motion. Boxes appeared in the guest room. "Just a few things for storage," Cheryl said with a breezy laugh. Walter carried in a full-length mirror, then a recliner, then a second mattress. Soon my linen closet was stuffed with her towels and my spice rack crowded with her jars. Brandon didn't even blink. He'd been helping them carry boxes. At night, I would lie awake remembering my mother's face, how small she looked in my grandmother's kitchen. I had sworn never to become her. Now here I was reliving her story, except I had an exit strategy. I made discreet appointments with a realtor during my lunch breaks. We met twice, walking through comparable properties in the area. She explained how a discreet listing could work, how buyers could be lined up without a public sign. "Move fast," I told her. "I want it done before anyone here notices." I'd been preparing for weeks, slowly gathering important documents and moving valuables to a small storage unit I rented with cash from my personal savings. As a real estate specialist, I knew exactly which buyers in the market would jump at my house, especially at the slightly below market price I was offering for a quick, clean sale. While Brandon and his parents nested deeper, I was filling out forms and scanning documents. The sale was almost ready to close. I just needed the right moment to draw the line. It came over dinner that rainy Wednesday night. Walter had commandeered my grill again. Cheryl had made another lumpy casserole, and Brandon was acting like a gracious host in his own little kingdom. "We're so comfortable here," Cheryl cooed. "Ashley, you've been such a blessing." Walter grinned. "Feels like home already." That's when Brandon leaned back in his chair and made his declaration. "You guys should just stay. Seriously, no more back and forth. This is your home now. Right, babe?" I set my fork down and looked each of them in the eye. "Sure," I said calmly. "That works perfectly for me, because tonight is my last night here." The room went still. 3 faces stared at me. "What?" Brandon barked. I stood, walked to the hallway, and returned with my suitcase. I placed it by the door and handed him an envelope. "Divorce papers," I said evenly. "You promised me we'd never live with your parents. You broke that promise the second you let them move in without asking." Cheryl shot up from her chair. "You're going to throw away your marriage over a few boxes?" This isn't about boxes, I said. It's about trust. Brandon's jaw clenched. You're insane. We're not actually getting divorced. Sign the papers. I already have. He looked at his parents. Walter's face was pale. Cheryl's eyes burned. You'll regret this, she hissed. Maybe, I said. I'll be back on Saturday to collect the rest of my things. I reached for the door, then paused and looked back at all three of them. You might want to start packing, too. Cheryl frowned. Excuse me? You'll see. Then I left. I drove straight to the hotel I'd reserved earlier that week, already paid for with my emergency fund. I had everything planned, a place to stay, enough savings to cover expenses until the house sold, and my mother on standby in case I needed longer-term support. For the past few nights, I had been walking through the house in silence, taking inventory of everything they had taken over. The framed photos on the shelves weren't mine. The smell in the kitchen wasn't my cooking. Even the living room cushions had been replaced. Cheryl said mine were too neutral and swapped them for gaudy red paisley. Walter had hung a calendar with golf jokes. I hadn't laughed once. I spent Thursday night at the hotel going through old receipts, closing out subscriptions, organizing documents. It was oddly therapeutic. Every drawer I cleared felt like peeling away another layer of a marriage I no longer recognized. This wasn't grief, it was relief, slow and steady. On Friday, I boxed up my personal items. Photo albums, my grandfather's watch, letters from my mom. I'd already given the movers detailed instructions on exactly which items to collect on Saturday, with a comprehensive inventory list and photos I'd taken over the previous weeks. The rest I didn't care about anymore. Let them keep the curtains and mugs and the couch they thought they owned. They hadn't just taken up space, they had tried to erase me from it. But I was about to remind them who this house actually belonged to. As I stepped out of my car on Saturday morning, the sky was overcast, a quiet, still gray that made everything feel heavier. But I felt light, calm, ready. This time, I wasn't walking into an ambush. I was walking in with a mirror, and they were about to see themselves clearly. The moving truck pulled up right on time. I stepped out in jeans and a clean button-down, hair tied back. No drama, just business. I climbed the porch steps. Brandon opened the door before I knocked, arms crossed like a bouncer. His face looked more tired than angry. "You're really doing this," he said, tone low and bitter. "You're actually moving out?" I didn't answer. I glanced inside. Cheryl's doilies on every surface, Walter's recliner by the fireplace, their clutter soaking into every inch of what had been my home. "You didn't pack," I said flatly. "Why would I?" Brandon snapped. "You're the one leaving." Cheryl appeared behind him with folded arms. Walter stood in the hall with a smug half-smile, holding a mug I didn't recognize. "This is still our house," Brandon barked. "You don't get to just show up and pretend you're in charge." "You left." I stared back at him. Behind me, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, footsteps on the path. Brandon frowned. "Who's that?" I turned and stepped aside. A woman in a navy blazer carrying a clipboard walked up the steps beside me. "Hi, I'm Karen from Bayside Realty," she said brightly. "Ashley, thanks for meeting me here. Ready for the walkthrough?" I smiled and looked past her into the house. "Let's get started." Karen stepped through the doorway like she'd done it 100 times, professional, cheerful, oblivious to the minefield she was walking into. Brandon didn't move. "Walkthrough? What the hell is going on?" Cheryl narrowed her eyes. "Ashley, what is this?" Walter stared at Karen's clipboard like it might bite him. Karen smiled politely at the three of them. "We're just here to evaluate the property before the final handoff. No need to worry, it'll only take a few minutes." "Handoff?" Brandon's voice cracked. "You're kidding, right?" I stepped past him and into the house. "I sold it," I said simply. "You what?" Cheryl gasped. Brandon's face contorted. "You're bluffing." Karen flipped through her folder. Sale finalized Wednesday. Buyer takes possession next week. We'll be scheduling the moving deadline for the current residents shortly. Cheryl stepped back like she'd been slapped. You can't do this. This is our home. No, Cheryl, I said, turning to face her. It was never your home. It wasn't Brandon's either. I bought this house before we got married. It was mine, and now it belongs to someone else. Brandon's voice lowered, desperate. Wait, you said we were renting it through a friend, that it was a good deal. That was the version I gave you, I said evenly. The truth? I used money from my father's inheritance. I didn't want that to be part of our marriage. I didn't think I needed to put up a banner reading, "Mine, not yours." I expected respect instead. Cheryl was fuming. You had that kind of money? At your age? There's no way. I did, I replied coldly. And I spent it on a future that clearly didn't include you three treating me like a doormat. Walter finally spoke, slow and stunned. So you're really selling the house out from under us? I already did, I said. You're trespassers now, or more accurately, guests with an eviction notice. Brandon turned red. You seriously think you can just waltz in here with some paperwork and throw us out? Karen looked up from her clipboard. Actually, yes. Legally, it's all here. I'll give you until Thursday to vacate. After that, it becomes a legal matter. Cheryl let out a bitter laugh. We just bought new furniture for this place. We financed the dining table. We have nowhere else to go. That's not my problem, I said. It never was. Brandon stepped forward. We're still married. You can't just... I held up my hand. No, you signed the divorce papers, remember? You shouted you'd gladly divorce me in front of your parents. So now you're no longer my husband, just a guy who scammed his way into someone else's house and lost. His eyes dropped. He didn't deny it. Please, Cheryl said, her voice cracking. Can't we just stay a little longer? At least until we find something. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had never seen me as an equal, only as a utility, someone who cooked, cleaned, stayed quiet, and knew her place. No, I said. By Monday, the moving truck was back, but this time for them. They tried to fight it. Cheryl cried to Karen, tried to stall the buyers, but the new owners had already booked renovations. Walter quietly boxed up his golf magazines. Brandon didn't say a word to me. I stood on the sidewalk, arms folded, watching as their final load rolled away. Karen stepped beside me. Want to walk through one last time? I shook my head. I'm good. A week later, Fiona texted me. Heard they're in a small rental apartment on the east side. All three crammed in. Brandon's furious. Cheryl's been calling Elliot daily, begging to stay with them. Apparently, the inheritance Brandon fought for wasn't an inheritance at all. The condo was in heavy debt. Walter still owed for renovations he'd done years ago, thinking the value would rise. It hadn't. The only thing Brandon won in his family power struggle was liability. Fiona added, Elliot offered to cover a few months of their rent if they promised never to ask to move in. They declined out of pride, I guess. Good. Let them have their pride. Let them carry the weight of their choices like I carried the mortgage on that house, alone, unappreciated, invisible. Except now, I wasn't invisible anymore. I moved in with my mom temporarily. She was surprised at first, worried even, but the moment I walked through her door, she exhaled with relief. I never liked how he talked to you, she admitted. You kept saying it was fine, but I could see it. I know what fine looks like. I know, I said. I think I wanted it to be fine so badly I stopped noticing when it wasn't. We made tea. We rearranged her living room. We talked into the night, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was home. Brandon tried to call me twice. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail. Ashley, please. I made mistakes. I know that. But we can fix this. We can buy another place. I'll talk to my parents. Just please don't shut me out. But he didn't say, I'm sorry. Not once. I deleted the message. 3 months later, our divorce was finalized. Brandon didn't contest it. There wasn't much left to fight for. The house was gone, and I made sure my lawyer included specific language that protected my remaining assets. We had a quick, clean break, just the way I wanted it. The buyers moved in 2 weeks later, a young couple, newly married. I left them a note on the kitchen counter with the keys. This house is full of noise and memory and lessons. Treat each other with respect. Don't ignore red flags. And for heaven's sake, don't give your parents a key. I smiled as I closed the door behind me. The weight of 3 years lifted from my chest. I hadn't just left a house, I'd left a trap, and I'd made sure the ones who said it were the ones left inside when the walls came down. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.